to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Hopefully some of the people who tuned in and submitted questions for the last two nights are also tuning in. I want to thank my friends at Reader's Magnet, who have really done a great job with my books, and really are bringing me out as far as my own personality goes. I'm not a particular individual who talks a lot about myself. I do love to talk about my books and my writing and the horror genre. But for me to talk like this is something new, and I'm enjoying it more and more each night. So I welcome everybody. Thank you, everybody that tuned in last night. There were some great questions, and so hopefully it'll be the same tonight. Again, I am here to talk about my books and my writing and a little bit about me. Maybe my cat Cleo will join us at some point. She was just here walking across the keyboard a little bit ago. But I guess she's camera shy, so maybe she'll come back in a little bit. So my Raven series starts out with the first book, Raven's Way, which takes place in Philadelphia, and talks about Johnny Raven coming into Philadelphia on his need for revenge. His wife and unborn child were slaughtered by a rogue werewolf. He has Michael Francis Utan. Hey, Michael, how are you? I miss you, buddy. I will say hi to Cleo for you. Absolutely. And Johnny Raven comes to Philadelphia after quite a long time of revenge and going crazy after the loss of his family. He does have his pack members and his family, but he goes off and lives on his own for a while until he hears about the deaths that are happening in Philadelphia, which brings him to Philadelphia, and actually teams up with Kathleen Morello, who is the police detective following up on all these grisly crimes. Of course, at that point, they have no idea who or what is causing it, but Johnny knows. And so there's quite a lot of action, a lot of beastly activity, so to speak. There is a vampire influence that comes in towards the end. The vampire influence is much, much more prevalent in the second book, the follow-up, which is titled Raven's Rage, Order of the Claw, with the final battle being fought at a very historic place in Philadelphia, Eastern State Penitentiary, a place that I went through 2 or 3 times, took a lot of pictures. It is quite an eerie place to walk through, up and down those halls and going into the cells, the cell blocks, and there were quite a lot of famous inmates there, like Al Capone. So it's quite a place to go. If you ever get to Philadelphia or live in Philadelphia, I would definitely recommend that you go see it. I do plan on reading the first chapter of Raven's Way tonight. Last night I read the poem that starts off the book. As I had mentioned, because of my writing of poetry throughout the years, writing poetry long before I started getting into fiction, I like to start my novels and end the novels with a poem. And in the case of the 2 Raven novels, all 4 poems are, of course, about werebeasts, so to speak. I also went into my 3rd novel, which is The Reptilian Factor. And this here takes place in Tucson, Arizona, where I lived for 2 years and where I loved very much. And this is about an alien who crashes in the Sonora Desert, is held captive the United States Air Force for a number of years until it breaks free. And it's not a happy alien, definitely. It's not not one of the ones you see on TV in sitcoms. And it wreaks havoc throughout the city of Tucson. One of the things I want to talk about early before I read a chapter of Raven's Way is, like I said, for years I wrote poetry, quite a lot of poetry. Some of it you save, some of it who knows what happens to it. But a lot of my poetry did survive. And through poetry, I met an awful lot of very, very good friends. I was on a couple poetry sites, and some of that together, I think it was a group of 5 or 6. And we wrote this very, very long, epic poetry, almost want to call it a story, where each of us would write the next particular part of the of this epic poem. When we did that, each of us got a chance to bring in and develop our own characters. And when we wrote contributed our part of the poem, we could not only tie everything in with the person or persons that were writing ahead of us, but also bring in the character and do something strong with our character, which then led the next poet to possibly delve into that as well. And one of the things that I'm going to do in the future, and actually the book is about 100 pages done, is I took all of those poems that I wrote specifically because it was mainly about a particular character. And I am developing all of those into my first fantasy type horror novel, which will be titled Scrolls of Sorrow. And I hope to have that published sometime next year. Each chapter will not be chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, but instead it will be scroll number 1, scroll number 2. And the scrolls are written by the main character in that book. And there's witches and so werewolves and everything in there too, but it takes place in a land far away, so to speak. But one of the things that I found when I started writing fiction was that maybe this isn't for other writers. I don't know if there are any writers listening that has written poetry and also fiction. But for me, once I started writing fiction, it was a totally different frame of mind. I was thinking about character and dialogue and scenes and settings and tying it all together. Whereas when I wrote poetry, sometimes it was nothing for me to write 2-3 poems a day, and with poetry, you write about so many different things in your life, some personal, some that you hear on the news or whatever, some that you hear about something else. But as much as I wrote poetry before I became a fiction writer, I have written some poetry, but not very much over the last, say, 15 years. I hope that that's going to change because I absolutely love poetry. I love to read it. I love to write it. I have a lot of friends on Facebook who are absolutely astounding poets. I'm going to shout out one, Susan Joyner Stump, who is not only a very, very good friend of mine, but absolutely one of the most prolific poets that I've ever read. In fact, she's asking a question now. Hi, Susan. I really enjoy your segments. What I wanted to ask you, since I've owned a real Canadian tundra wolf myself, and she has, I've seen pictures of it. Have you ever met a real wolf? Have you ever dreamed of having one? I have not really. Well, I have. Outside of Philadelphia, on Route 23, on the other side of Phoenixville, I found out that there was a place that bred dogs, and like 4 or 5 different breeds of dogs. And one of the things that they had there, amazingly, was a pavilion for wolves, and they had about, I'm going to say about 10 or 12 of them. And so I stopped there a couple times. They didn't walk free. They were caged. But I used that in actually a chapter of Raven's Rage, where there's a particular werewolf that's coming to Philadelphia. And he's actually tied in with the master vampire of Seattle, Roberto. And I have him actually realize that these wolves are in captivity there. So he stops and he sneaks through the woods and he lets the wolves out. And once the wolves are loose, they run through the area and end up in Valley Forge Park. So, so in that aspect of it, I think I felt great that at least in my book, I was freeing these wolves. And Susan, I know I've seen the pictures of your wolf, and I have to tell you, I am so jealous. I'm beside myself. You are an absolute animal lover and a very good friend, and thank you so much. So one of the things I want to do tonight is, if I hopefully, is the back cover of Raven's Way reads, "There is danger and death in our midst, a malignancy that rides the nighttime breezes underneath the soft breath of a full moon. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, is about to be drawn into a nightmare never realized before. Creatures now prowl the moonlit streets that Detective Kathleen Morello has sworn to protect. Always a professional, her life and values are about to be torn apart. However, an extremely rugged and handsome, but equally strange and dangerous man has arrived to help track down this monstrous beast which only knows how to kill and who despises humanity. Johnny Raven, a creature of legend himself, will introduce Detective Morello into a world of nightmarish proportions. As we steal her heart and make her experience love like she never has before. After all, she is only human for now. So I'm going to go ahead and last night I read Calm Wolf, which was the is the poem that starts it off. So I'm going to go ahead and chapter 1 is only 5 pages, so hopefully I won't bore you, and I'll try not to make too many mistakes. Chapter 1, Raven's Way. There was death in the air, pure evil. Other than the occasional nervous chirp of an anxious cricket, the loudest sound in the restless air was the wayward call of a lonely owl echoing off the bleak darkness. A silky whisper of brittle leaves warily danced across the forest carpet, adding a peculiar spookiness to this scene ripped from the pages of any first-rate horror novel. However, this was real, and hell was near. It was obscenely quiet. Danger grabbed the night in a stranglehold of ominous ferocity. Animals that normally romped by day now huddled shivering in their tiny dens this very night. And not from the bite of winter winds, but rather the heart-stopping scent of death within their midst. Creatures that usually hunted underneath a veil of darkness knew enough now to stay safe and not to venture out for fear they would become prey themselves. And so the deadly quiet persisted. Moonlight slithered through small cracks in the sheltering canopy above this quivering world. Sporadically, a piece of moonbeam would reflect off 2 feral yellow ovals, eyes of the beast. It could easily be said this was not just any beast. The creature that stared with unblinking gaze was beyond the ken of human thought. Legends had been created about monsters that prowled up underneath a full moon. Frightening tales whispered around flickering campfires. Nightmares for those who believed in them. Sheer terror for those who did not. For these nightmares to become reality, then death would surely ensue. There were no enemies this insidious creature had to fear, for he and his kind were the ones to be frightened of. Its world was the underbelly of humanity. His prey, those foolish enough not to believe in monsters and the cast-offs that society had all but rejected. But under tonight's moonlit spell, this obscene creature itself was the prey. Harried voices broke the nighttime stillness, mingled with the frenzied baying of scent-hounds whose bravery alone came from the manic urges of the pack and that of a firm master's hand. Scathing beams of flashlights, like an army of drunken cyclops, sliced through the haunting, inky darkness. This frightened search party sought an unknown killer with a sickening picture of 2 mangled bodies of young boys still etched horrifically upon their minds. Their slaughtered innocents had been discovered by a startled jogger in Fairmount Park beneath a sobbing moon. The beast they searched for now was a destroyer of unspeakable savagery, whose killing fields lay below a shivering heaven. Sadly, these brave men truly had no conception of what horror lay in wait for them. Only the stark realization that they could be slaughtered next. A low rumble erupted from the beast's massive chest, enough to cripple with fear the staunchest of men. And if someone was unlucky enough to hear this menacing growl, It would most likely be the next to last sound that they heard before listening to the snapping of their own bones amidst a final death rattle. The creature suddenly moved and slid like a mysterious shadow into the swirling fog. Death had now entered the arena, and there was not a prayer to be spoken that would prevent it from happening. No weapon in their puny arsenal, or faith and belief in a higher power, could help them this night. Blood would be shed because they dared search for a creature from their darkest nightmares. In a spastic eruption, the dogs suddenly went berserk, as they were assailed with the scent of a most dangerous prey. Quickly, barks of anxiety became cowardly whimpers and yelps of terror. Two frightened beagles broke free from their long tethers and sped off, hoping to see another sunrise, their master yelling obscenities and threats, but to no avail. Tango, a very misguided coon dog, surged forward, though, either extremely brave or too stupid to realize what lay in store for him. His older brother, Charlie, just stood his ground and growled a tepid warning, tail no longer wagging as nervous slobber dribbled from his quivering jowls. Tango rushed forward and charged into the brush, anxious to please his handler and claim bragging rights. He stopped quickly, nose pointed to the ground, nostrils flaring as he picked up a scent never encountered before, but deep down, passed on through generations of hunting dogs before him. His brain registered danger while his fear screamed woof. With his frantic barks and mournful baying now ceased, the stillness was even thicker than before. Lonely crickets no longer chirped. Wary, observant owls were too alarmed to hoot a warning from their lonely lookout posts. Frightened dogs had completely lost any desire for the hunt. Well, all but for that crazy Tango, that is. Tango, Tango, hey boy, his handler yelled, followed by a sharp whistle. You crazy coon dog. What you got, boy? Tango knew he had possibly heard the voice of his owner for the last time, as he raised his head and stared at two bright yellow, murderous eyes. The coon dog's head dropped low as he curled his tail securely between his legs, falling to the ground in what he hoped would be a life-saving sign of submission. It didn't work. The dark shadow with a ferocious glare moved at breathtaking speed. With a mighty swipe of massive claws, the monster severed the coon dog's head, sending it sailing through the moonlight like a spinning football heading for a game-winning field goal. It landed no more than 3 feet in front of Nestor, Tango's handler, and then rolled awkwardly to lie at the quivering toes of a frightened Charlie. Holy shit, Nestor screamed out loud, both in shock and rage. Oh my God, Tango, it killed my Tango. A roar then of unspeakable horror split the night, sending icy shivers up and down the spine of every policeman. Nestor couldn't pull his eyes away from the severed head of his beloved Tango. He felt his arm yank up and back, his hand releasing the other leash. Charlie knew enough to turn and tear ass from whatever creature was out there. Nestor, however, was not that smart. Hearing another roar and then a wild thrashing of brush, he glanced up and came face to face with a heart-stopping vision of evil. A mouth full of slavering fangs and fetid breath was no more than 6 inches away from his very frightened face. The beast staring at him with maniacal hatred and a monstrous need to kill. Nestor, with warm urine pouring down his pant leg, had but a few seconds to whisper, "Dear God, forgive me, for I have sinned," before his throat was savagely torn out and death viciously yanked him away. Suddenly the night erupted with frenzied shouts of nervous policemen, followed by a rapid volley of panicky gunfire. Flashes from urgent rifles lit for a second the terrified eyes of every shooter. Bullets whizzed and crashed against innocent trees, with an occasional scream of pain when one impacted soft human jellied from fear. Hold your fire. Damn it, stop shooting, yelled a frenetic voice. Echoes repeatedly bounced around like a soccer ball as Captain Nathan Gans tried desperately to minimize the damage from friendly fire being inflicted by his own men. As the crescendo died down, the only sounds Gans heard were the rapid breathing of Officer Lightman to his left and the unsteady pounding of his own slightly damaged heart. He figured this was not good therapy for the newly inserted stents that now resided in two of his arteries. Suddenly he was startled as a frightened coon dog nearly bowled him over, Charlie racing by to follow the paw prints of his deserting beagle brethren. Nestor! Hey, Nestor, are you okay? Can anybody out there see where Nestor is? Gans called out. Getting no reply from his good friend was not the answer he had hoped to receive. Then he heard a startled voice and glanced to his right. Captain, over here. Holy shit. Followed immediately by loud, rapid heaves, resulting in the violent eruption of an earlier dinner of chicken pot pie and mashed taters. Gans grabbed Lightman by the shoulder after pushing the officer's rifle away from his own face, moved towards the direction of where the vomiting was still coming from. He thought this night was just becoming more and more of a nightmare. What kind of unspeakable hell were they stalking? Lord, for that matter, what monstrously hunted them? He felt Lightman stumble and fall forward. Gans immediately swerved and pointed his flashlight toward the ground. Quickly, the cheeseburger and fries he had eaten around 7 o'clock almost roared back up his own throat. Lightman lay sprawled across Nestor's savage body, his flashlight beam shining garishly upon dark blood, still spurting wildly from two evenly severed carotid arteries. Off to the right, with tongue lolling from the side of an open mouth, stared the black, unseeing eyes of Tango. Gans felt himself reeling backwards before he was held up by someone closely behind him. Jesus H. Christ, what did this? He said. What kind of monster is out there? Whispered Captain Nathan Gans. He had spent nearly 30 years on the Philadelphia police force and had never in his entire career been this terrified of anything in his life. But he clearly knew that what they now faced was not taught in any classroom at the academy or faced on any street corner with some gun-wielding assailant. Monsters like this were not ever meant to exist outside of nightmares and movie screens. With a silver moon glittering off the tranquil black water of a peacefully meandering Schuylkill River, the distinct savage howl of a vicious wolf vibrated the stark Philadelphia skyline. Captain Gans instinctively made the sign of the cross as he stared down at the mutilated body of Nestor Sherrick and the head of his beloved Tango. Thank God tomorrow was Sunday, because he desperately needed to talk this one over with the big guy upstairs, along with Father Joseph, who thought Nathan was a little crazy anyway, especially since wolves or monsters were not supposed to exist in his wonderful city of brotherly love. So that is the first chapter of Raven's Way. Chapter 2 then goes into bringing in the character of Johnny Raven, and the third chapter brings in the character of Kathleen Morello. Elizabeth Patino, Loving Her Live, Booth Sessions, Kerry. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I appreciate that very much. Amanda Kane, hi, Kerry. I am a fan. Thank you, Amanda, very much. Precious Margarina, awesome cover. Was that your own idea or did someone help you? Actually, both covers for the Raven novels and even for my Reptilian Factor. I had the idea. I presented picture ideas to the people who created the original covers for the books when they were first originally printed back in a number of years Um, this particular picture on the cover of Raven's Way, the skyline, actually took that picture, sent that off to my publisher, who conveniently found a couple wolves to stick their heads out of the building, so to speak. The cover for Raven's Rage, as I had said, Amanda Kane, so amazing. Thank you, Amanda. That hallway there in the steps is actually from a picture that I took at Eastern State Penitentiary. Going through there twice and taking all the pictures definitely gave me the very good material and substance where I wanted to create the final battle, Raven's Rage, which is quite intense, quite vicious. You got Johnny Raven there doing battle with Roberto, the master vampire of Seattle. You got Roberto's army running around fighting with the vampire of Philadelphia, Joshua's army. So it's quite intense. And it actually, several break free and they actually go down a few blocks to where the Philadelphia Art Museum is. And that is where the final single battle is. The third Raven novel I have started, it is will be titled Raven Unleashed. And at the end of Raven's Rage, Johnny is quite enraged himself because of things that happen. And he is ready to avenge some wrongs that were done to both him and Kathleen Morello. The reptilian factor, as I had mentioned, takes place in Tucson, Arizona, a place that I really, really love. If I ever, like right now I'm living in Ohio, but if I ever had the money to spend my final years, Tucson, Arizona is just a wonderful place. And spending 2 years there, I knew the area very well. Sabino Canyon, Mount Lemmon is just a great set for a book. And so I had a really, really good time writing that book, as I do writing all of my books. I guess you could say I'm not a prolific writer, where someone maybe who does it full time can write 5 or 6 books a year. It seems. I don't know how that's done, but but when you work, and a lot of authors are people that do have to work during the day. So when do they write? Well, they write at night if they're not too tired. They write on weekends. They write on holidays. For me, even now, if I'm not writing, my mind is always thinking of things, and I'm always writing it down so that I don't forget. And who knows? Sometimes those notes, sometimes that possibility of a title pops into your head. It would not take me long to forget it. So I write it down as soon as I can. And my phone is filled with them, believe me. So I'm not sure how much longer, how much more time I have. I certainly hope you enjoyed the reading of the first chapter of Raven's Way. I think tomorrow night I will go ahead and read the first chapter of Raven's Rage. I just love these 2 books. I love the characters. Of course, one of the main characters in the Raven series is my beautiful, wonderful, magnificent dog, Rain, who sadly is no longer with me. She passed away a number of years ago, but what an awesome dog. And I immediately said, there's no way that I'm going to let her memory fade away. So she is now a very, very strong part of the Raven series and will continue to be also. And after a vicious fight with a werewolf herself. She is now no longer a dog. So I want to thank everybody. I had a great time tonight. Books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Visit my website. You can read first chapters, poems, and short stories as well. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow night at 6:30. Good night.